It didn't begin with you. Not with your father. Not even with your grandfather. Not with the man who fought in some forgotten war, or built houses from mud and ash, or kissed the hand of an emperor with trembling fingers. It began much earlier. Somewhere in a forest where there were no names, no roads, only the smell of wet earth, old blood, and a man crouched in silence, gnawing a beetle to stay alive a few hours longer. He didn't know you'd ever exist. He didn't know about light bulbs or caffeine or existential dread. He didn't even know what tomorrow was. All he knew was that the sun was falling, and if he didn't find warmth or food or shelter, the night would eat him. If he had taken one fewer step, if he had tripped, missed, frozen, bled, you wouldn't be here. But he survived. And so did the next, and the next. Through ice and plague and fire and hunger, they survived. The chain broke 1,000,000 times, but never completely. Now, here you are, with a body that carries their scars, with a heart that still beats like theirs did, panicked, hopeful, stubborn. This is the story of how you, of all people, somehow exist. Together, we'll walk through 15 doors, and behind each one, a moment when humanity nearly vanished. Moments when the earth said, enough. But someone, your someone, kept going. Slowly, through snow, through ash, through silence. So wrap up, close your eyes, and get ready to hear a story not about you, but about the fact that you could have never been. If that feels like a miracle, hit subscribe, leave a like to thank your ancestors, and tell me in the comments, what city are you listening from and what time is it right now? Because someone else, somewhere, might be falling asleep to the same impossible miracle as you.
The Ice Age. You shouldn't have survived the cold. You are hungry again. But hunger is normal. It's like the wind or the smell of fur and smoke. It's there, constant, dull, gnawing, like your back, your feet, your memory. Your hands are raw, cracked open from the cold. You press them into your armpits as you walk, hoping to trick your body into thinking they're still alive. The snow isn't soft. It's sharp, like ground glass covering the earth in silence. You don't walk through it. You climb it, push against it, fall into it. The sky is the color of bone. The trees are frozen statues. And somewhere in this white desert, a beast bigger than your shelter, a mammoth, is out there moving in the distance. You don't remember when you last saw warmth. You remember fire, but not how to make it. You remember meat, but only the taste. You remember sleep, but your bones won't let you have it. You are not alone. There are others, all of them wrapped in skins, all of them breathing steam, all of them surviving by a thread. Your child, too small to walk, sleeps on your back, tied in furs, breathing softly. You haven't spoken in hours. there's nothing to say. You all know, tonight someone might die. Not from battle, not from an enemy, but from silence, from wind, from that slow tightening in the chest that says, I'm done. Your shelter is a circle of mammoth bones, covered in stretched hides. It smells like grease and wet fur and burnt marrow. You built it yourself, and every gust of wind reminds you that it wants to collapse. Inside, the old ones sit in silence. A woman hums. A man sharpens a stone. A baby coughs, and everyone freezes. You know what coughs can mean. You know what it meant last winter, when that cough turned red and took away your brother. But there's no escape, no south, no spring, only more white, more cold, more waiting. Outside, the world is ice and silence. Panthera spalea, the cave lion, has been following you for days. You saw the prince. You smelled the fear in the air. It waits for someone to fall behind. It knows your pace is slowing. It knows the wind steals warmth from your lungs. It's patient. Tonight, you chew leather, not food, just a piece of old hide. You chew it because it tricks your stomach into thinking there's something there. It doesn't work. You try to sleep. You dream of sun, of green, of a day when your child is not tied to your back, but running beside you, laughing. You wake up cold. So cold you forget your name. You are not special. You have no idea what a future is. But you survived this day, and the next, and the next. And somehow, against the math, you became part of the story.
The dawn of agriculture. You were tired of chasing mammoths, so you chose to suffer differently. Your legs are tired, always tired. You've spent your life walking, hunting, bleeding, starving. And it wasn't heroic. It was just loud, wet, cold, and full of failure. So one day, someone says it aloud. Let's stop. Stop moving. Stop chasing meat that disappears into the trees. Stop praying for hoof prints in the mud and bones in the snow. Instead, plant a seed. At first, it feels like a joke. Seeds are for birds, for the wind. You don't eat them. You eat things that bleed. But you are tired. Your skin is thin. Your ribs are showing. And your child keeps asking, "Where is food?" in a voice too quiet to be alive. So you do it. You dig. You wait. You stare at the dirt like it owes you something. And one day, green. A stalk rises from the ground. A symbol, you think, of victory. But it's not. You've traded one kind of suffering for another. You build walls, not to keep out beasts, but to keep in your hunger. You store grain in pits. You sleep beside it. You watch it rot. You cry when it molds. You learn words like famine, blight, infestation. You no longer follow herds. You follow seasons. You track the sky, the sun, the water. You pray differently now. Not for meat, but for rain. And when rain doesn't come, you starve in place. No more escape. No more let's move to better land. This is your land now. And if it turns to dust, so do you. You live with more people now. More bodies, more filth, more smells, more coughing. You don't understand why everyone's getting sick, but they are. Your teeth, once strong, begin to rot. The meat is gone. Your bones ache. Your belly swells from hunger, not fullness. You dig graves, next to the fields you dug for food. You want to leave. But where would you go? This is home now. A place that gives you just enough to live and never enough to rest. Still, you hold on. Because something has changed inside you. Something stubborn. You've built a wall. You've claimed a corner of the earth. And even if it kills you, you will stay. And in that corner, your child learns to walk, learns to sew, learns to bury the dead with hands that once held flowers. And one day, when your bones lie beneath this very soil, someone will call this place a civilization. But for you, it was never glory. It was just another way of not dying. You survived. Again. But the next chapter will not be so patient. The Mongol invasions. You heard the hooves before you heard the screams. You're a farmer now, or maybe a potter, or a scribe. It doesn't matter, because today you will be a witness. And if the dust doesn't take you, the fire will. The morning begins like every other. Sunlight creeping over mud walls. Children chasing chickens. A cart with one broken wheel. The smell of bread and sweat. And then, a sound. It doesn't belong here. At first, it's nothing. A murmur, a breeze. But then it builds, becomes thunder, becomes rhythm. Hooves. Hundreds of them, moving fast, too fast. You drop the pot in your hands, the bread, the thought. You run to the wall, and you see it. A cloud of dust moving like it's alive. And from it, steel, arrows, fire. There's no time to prepare, no time to scream, only time to pray, and not even to your gods. Because the riders coming toward you have no gods but war. They move like smoke, they kill like wind, and they do not stop. You've never seen anything like it. Men on horses that don't gallop, they glide. They shoot while riding and never miss. They do not knock on your gates. They tear them down. Your village is not a battlefield. It's a demonstration. The walls crumble. Your neighbors fall. A child is struck by an arrow so quickly, you don't hear the impact, only the silence that follows. You don't fight. You hide. Beneath a floorboard, behind a clay jar, under a pile of old sacks. You hold your breath like it's glass. And through a crack in the wood, you see their boots, their swords, a hand dragging someone screaming. Then, nothing. Just fire. When you crawl out, The sky is black. The streets are silent. The town square is full of bodies, but no sound, no moaning, no final words. Even the flies seem stunned. You are alive, but only by accident. Later, you hear the stories, whispers in what's left of the world. That they used the bones of your people to build pyramids of warning. That some cities surrendered and were still slaughtered. That others resisted and were made examples. You do not doubt it. The Mongols didn't win battles. They removed the possibility of survival. And when they rode on, they left nothing but dust. You leave the ruins behind. Start walking. You don't know where. There's no home left, no family, just footsteps in ash and a single thought in your head. They shouldn't have spared me, but they did. And so you keep walking. Your blood now carries fire, and your silence carries everyone who didn't make it.
The Black Death. You coughed once, and everyone looked at you like you were already dead. You don't feel sick. Not at first. Just a little tired. Just a little warm. Just a small pain behind your eyes that whispers, maybe you're just tired of fear. Your street smells strange lately. Stronger. Meat rots faster. The baker's wife hasn't opened her shutters in 3 days. A man drags a cart past your door, yelling, "Bring out your dead!" He doesn't stop yelling, even when no one comes. At the tavern, people whisper. The words are like insects, soft, fast, crawling through your ears. Came from the east. Ships. Rats. God's punishment. No one survives the black lumps. You don't know what lumps they mean. Until you wake up at night, your sheets stuck to your skin, and your armpits feel like they're burning from the inside. You try not to look, but you do. There's a swelling there, tight, round, hot, like something alive is trying to push out of your skin. You cough once, twice. The third time, you feel wetness, red. You don't tell anyone. You wear a scarf. You say you've got a cold. You lie and lie and lie. Because you've seen what happens when people find out. The town healer doesn't heal. She wraps your house in tar. She sends boys with boards and hammers. And within an hour, your door is nailed shut from the outside. You're not sick anymore. You're buried upright. You hear your wife sobbing behind the wall, your child pounding on the door. You want to scream, but every breath feels like you're breathing in broken glass. And then, silence. Not peaceful silence, plague silence. The kind where the birds stop singing. The kind where the city sounds like it has forgotten what life feels like. You fall asleep with your back against the door, and you dream, not of survival, but of before, when you could hold someone without killing them, when you could share a cup without ending a bloodline. Eventually, the boards are pulled away, not for you, but because the rat catchers need your house. You are not there anymore. Not really. just a husk in a dark room, just another lump in the count. But outside, somehow others live. They bury you, burn your sheets, scrub your walls with vinegar. They wear masks shaped like birds, filled with flowers and hope and nothing that ever helped. And still they live. Not all, but some. And one of them, maybe a boy, left alone after the nails were pulled, will one day carry your blood in his veins, even if he never knew your name, even if you never said goodbye, even if the only thing you left him was the silence.
The Toba supervolcano. The sun disappeared, and you forgot what warmth was. You wake to silence. But it's not peace. It's the kind of silence that feels wrong. Too wide, too still, too final. You step outside your shelter. The sky is the color of ash. Not clouds, not night, just gray, thick, endless. The sun is gone. You look up, but there's no source of light. Only a dull, poisoned glow, like a fire smothered in wet leaves. It hasn't rained in weeks, but your feet sink into something soft, ash. The trees around you are drooping. Their leaves, if they still have any, are blackened, curled, and crumbling like old bone. The birds are gone. The insects, too. The world feels unplugged, dead. You don't know the word volcano. You don't know what Indonesia is. You've never heard of Toba. But you know something exploded. You felt it in your spine days ago, when the ground shook like it wanted to escape its own skin. The sky changed after that. The air, the food, everything started tasting like dirt, even water. Your people stop laughing. Then they stop talking. Then they stop waking up. You tell your child the sun is just hiding, that it will come back tomorrow. But the tomorrows are stacking, and the cold keeps growing. You chew bark, not because it helps, but because you need to chew something, just to remember you're still here. Food, gone. Fish, gone. Roots, frozen in soil that won't listen. You eat rats, then the bones of rats, then the hope of rats. It gets colder, not snow cold, not night cold, extinction cold. The kind of cold that crawls inside your body and tells your blood to give up. The elders huddle together. Their stories become shorter, then stop. Your baby won't cry anymore. She just stares, like she's already somewhere else. There are fewer of you every day. No graves, no tears, just empty spots by the fire. Except there's no fire. There's no wood left. Nothing will burn. You begin to forget light. Your memories of sun start feeling like dreams you borrowed from someone else. You hold your child at night not to protect her, but to remember warmth. You talk to her even after she stops breathing, because if you stop speaking, you disappear. And then, one morning, you smell something strange. The air is still cold, but there's a glimmer in the sky. Something almost golden, faint, flickering, like the earth is trying to remember how to be alive again. The silence loosens. A bird call, a single drop of water, a patch of ground not coated in ash. It's not much, but it's something. You stand. Your legs don't want to, but you do. Because someone has to remember this. Not with words, not with books, but with blood. And your blood, stubborn and freezing and slow, carries the seed of every life that comes after. You should have died in darkness, but you didn't. And because of that, someone, somewhere, is reading this story with a light on.
The Bronze Age collapse. You built a world from fire and stone, then watched it crumble for no reason. You live in a city now, not a hut, not a cave, a city. Streets paved with stone, walls tall enough to keep the wilds out, markets full of grain, cloth, oil, and copper. You trade tablets of clay inscribed with symbols your ancestors would have thought were magic. You even have a word for future. You believe in it, because for the first time, things feel permanent. Ships arrive at port. They bring tin. You melt it with copper. You forge bronze, stronger, sharper, cleaner. You make tools, swords, sickles. You harvest more. You fight better. You think, this is civilization. We did it. But then something changes. Not all at once. It's slower than fire, but just as final. A rumor from the coast, a ship that never returned. A trader swears the ports in Mycenae are quiet. A scribe tells you the Hittites have stopped writing. And the last caravan from Egypt never arrived. You wait. You send messengers. They do not return. The market thins. The bronze is harder to come by. Without tin, there is no edge. Your blades dull. Your tools break. The harvest shrinks. You blame the rain. Then the gods. Then your neighbor. You fortify the walls, not for beasts, but for other people, because now they're starving too. Then, one night, you see fire on the hills, not controlled, not sacred. Destruction. Your gates are closed, but gates don't stop famine. Gates don't stop strangers who've lost everything. Gates don't stop chaos. The people who come, they don't speak your language. They don't bargain. They don't ask. They take. Your city, once a beacon of order, turns to ash and echo. Scribes stop writing. Stones fall. Wells fill with corpses. Temples are looted. Statues pulled down by men too hungry to care. You try to save your child. You hide her beneath amphorae. You tell her to stay quiet, that it'll pass, that everything will be okay. You lie. You run into the wilderness, away from streets you built with your hands, away from the world you thought would last forever. You become a refugee. Again, you barter for bread with stories no one believes. You cry in a language no one understands. You carry names that mean nothing now. And somewhere behind you, a temple crumbles, and with it, 1,000 years of memory. Later, no one will know what happened. Scholars will argue. Famine? Sea peoples? Volcanoes? Climate? Rebellion? No one agrees. All they know is everything fell, almost all at once, and the people who survived forgot. They forgot how to write, how to build, how to dream forward. You forget too, not because you want to, but because the world doesn't let you remember. You hold your child close in the dirt, whisper a lullaby from a dead city, and tell her a lie. That world will come back one day. Maybe it will. Maybe it already has. And maybe it will fall again.
The Siege of Jerusalem, 70 CE. You believed in God, but Rome believed in fire. You live in a city of stone and scripture. Jerusalem, your home, your temple, your center of gravity. The city of your father's prayers and your mother's warnings. A place where prophets once walked barefoot, and where every stone tells a story too old for your tongue. But stories don't stop soldiers, and prayers don't stop Rome. At first, it was whispers that the legions were coming, that a general named Titus marched with 20,000 men, that they brought not just swords, but towers, siege engines, famine. You didn't believe it. The temple stood, and God was here. Until the gates closed, and the city, your city, became a trap. The food ran out first. You stretched barley like silk, boiled leather into soup, scraped crumbs from walls like gold. Then the water. Then the trust. Neighbors turned on neighbors. Men fought in the streets over mold. And in the temple, people prayed so hard they forgot how to breathe. You watched a mother bury her child in silence, then eat the cloth that wrapped him. And still, Rome waited. From the hills, they watched you starve. They laughed from their tents. They catapulted rut into your streets, corpses, dung, plague. You heard the engines at night, the wooden groan of machines too big to understand, the slow, steady pulse of inevitability. You prayed, and still they came. The walls broke with a sound that was not thunder, but something worse, final, human. They didn't come to conquer. They came to erase. The streets ran red. People burned like offerings. And the temple, the one built by Solomon, rebuilt by kings, a place where the very breath of God was said to live, collapsed into smoke. The gold melted. The ark was gone. The scrolls turned to cinders, and the priests screamed until their mouths filled with ash. You didn't fight. You hid. And even then, they found you. You watched your city die through a crack in a cellar wall. You saw a soldier light a torch and smile. You whispered every word of every prayer you knew, But it didn't stop the fire from coming down the stairs. Afterward, the survivors were dragged into chains, paraded through Roman streets like animals, mocked, sold, forgotten. And yet, you lived. Somehow, you walked away, not with your city, not with your faith, but with your breath. You took it into the hills, and when your child asked, why would God allow this, you had no answer, just silence. But even in that silence, the bloodline continued. And so, centuries later, someone would walk through a ruined city and feel something stir in their bones, a memory, a warning, a whisper from the dust. We were here. The fall of the Western Roman Empire. You were a citizen of forever, and then forever ended. You were born Roman, not a king, not a senator, just a name in the census, a soul in a toga, a body in a bathhouse. You had streets, aqueducts, coins with faces on them. You had certainty. The empire was not a place. It was the world. Its roads reached everywhere. Its gods whispered from every altar. Its laws wrapped you like a warm wool cloak. Rome wasn't a city. It was order. Until it wasn't. It began with murmurs. The northern borders grew restless. Barbarians, they said. Tribes of tall men with wild eyes and hungers sharpened by cold. You heard of their names: Goths, Vandals, Huns, each one sounding less human than the last. But Rome was eternal. So you kept going. You paid your taxes. You saluted statues. You lit your lamps. And then the lamps started to go out. Trade stopped. Ships disappeared. The grain fleets from Egypt never came. Your coin, once shining silver, turned dull, then thin, then worthless. You bought bread with hope, and hope was running out. You saw the legions falter. Their armor wasn't polished anymore. Their shields didn't match. And some of them didn't even speak Latin. They took orders in Germanic tongues. They fought because they were paid, and they weren't paid. Soon they stopped fighting. Then came the fires. They say it was 410 when the Visigoths entered Rome itself. You didn't believe it. Rome could not fall. And yet, you watched as they walked down your marble streets like it was theirs now. You heard the temples break. You smelled libraries burn. You saw men in wolf-pelt cloaks carve their names into walls older than memory. No one stopped them. You fled. Through the cracks in the empire, into lands that used to be Roman, but now belonged to no one. You carried nothing but a few coins and a story your grandmother once told you. A story about when everything made sense. In the dark, you tried to explain Rome to your children. You drew aqueducts in the dirt. You described hot baths, paved roads, clean water. They thought you were dreaming, and maybe you were, because soon you forgot the smell of marble.
forgot the sound of Latin shouted in a forum, forgot the weight of law. You lived in a hut. You traded bread for protection. You watched warlords become kings, and kings become myths. The last emperor? A child. Romulus Augustulus. He never ruled anything but fear. The empire didn't end with a bang, but with a letter and a sigh, and a door quietly closing on history. You lived past it, but something in you didn't. And centuries later, someone will dig up your street. They'll brush away the dirt and say, "Look, this used to be Rome." And for a moment, you'll exist again. In the dust, in the cracks, in the silence that followed the fall.
The Great Famine of 1315. The rain kept falling, and the world began to rot. You were born in mud. Not by accident, by design. Your roof leaks. Your boots leak. Even your name feels damp. You're a peasant, yes, but a survivor. Your father taught you how to read the sky, how to cut wheat before it turned sour, how to bury children quietly so the priest doesn't charge you twice. You know how to live with little, but this is less than little. The rains begin in the spring, but they don't stop. The fields don't dry. The grain doesn't ripen. You look out across the land and see not gold, but a green so sickly it feels like envy made real. The sheep sink in mud. The cows lie down and do not rise. The pigs stop squealing. Even the rats look thinner. You try everything. Dig drainage ditches. Plant early. Plant late. You pray. You steal seed from neighbors. You barter your last belt for salt. It makes no difference. The ground has turned against you. The sky is not a god. It's a weight pressing down with gray fists. By autumn, you're chewing leaves, tree bark, boiled roots that stain your mouth black. You crush bones and mix them with oats. Sometimes you eat the oats first. Sometimes the bones are all you have. You dream of bread like it's a woman you once loved. Your village changes. The priest no longer speaks of heaven. He speaks of mercy, like it's something that has already left. People stop talking. Then they stop burying. Then they stop waking. You see a woman sell her child for grain. You see a man dig up the freshly dead for meat. You see your neighbor catch a crow, pluck it, then pray over its bones. Your hands shake too much to hold a scythe. Not that there's anything left to cut. You walk to town, or what's left of it. Every face is the same, a mouth that's forgotten how to close. The market stalls are empty. The inns are locked. The church doors hang open, as if even God has gone looking for food. You beg, not for coins,
for mold, crumbs, spoiled fat scraped from a wooden spoon. You find a patch of mushrooms near a tree. You eat them. They do not save you. They do not kill you. They simply rearrange your thoughts until you're lying in the mud, laughing at a bird that isn't there. The famine lasts 2 years. Some say 3. It doesn't end cleanly. The rain stops, but the soil remembers. And so do you. You live, not proudly, not whole, but enough. Your stomach shrinks. Your hands forget how to grow things. Your eyes learn to measure every cloud like a threat. But your child miraculously stands. She looks at you with a face you don't recognize, not because she's different, but because you are. You came through darkness, through rot, through the hunger that tried to turn humans into animals. And somewhere, centuries later, someone will eat a slice of bread without thinking twice. Because you didn't let go.
The Year Without a Summer, 1816. The volcano was in Indonesia, but the frost was in your bones. You thought winter had ended. The snow melted. The birds returned, quietly. The trees began to bud, shy and cautious. You dug the earth with calloused hands and whispered to the seeds like they were secrets. Spring arrived, on paper, but something felt wrong. The air was colder than it should be, the wind sharper, the sun dim, pale, suspiciously absent. You blamed yourself. You blamed your tools. You blamed God. But God hadn't changed. The sky had. Thousands of miles away, on the island of Sumbawa, a volcano named Tambora tore itself open. You didn't hear the explosion, but the sky did. It swallowed the ash, spread it like disease. A fine dust drifted through the upper atmosphere, turning blue skies the color of bruises. And that dust, it found you. Summer never came. The frost arrived in June. It killed the sprouts before they grew, then the potatoes, then the animals that fed on what used to be grass. You saw a pond freeze overnight. You saw snow fall in July. You saw your breath every morning without fail. And still you planted, because you didn't know what else to do. You knelt in cold soil with frozen fingers. You begged the earth for warmth, but the seeds gave you silence. The hunger crept in again, not like a beast, like a fog, slow, quiet, and everywhere. In the village, bread prices doubled, then tripled, then disappeared entirely. People ate the seed grain, then the feed grain, then the grain sacks themselves. You watched a man cook his shoes. You watched a mother sell her hair, and a poet trade his coat for ink and firewood. At night, you wrapped yourself in every cloth you owned. Your breath curled in the air like smoke with nowhere to go. The walls cracked with cold, and the silence was too loud to sleep. Somewhere across the sea, a young woman named Mary Shelley sat by a lake in Switzerland. She watched the same black sky, felt the same chill in her spine, and began writing about a creature assembled from death. Because the world felt like that now, stitched together, unnatural, waiting to fall apart. You didn't write. You chopped wood, you boiled roots, you counted days between meals. You looked at the sky and wondered if it was punishment, or if the world had simply forgotten you existed. And yet, you survived. Not with warmth, not with joy, but with the dull, stubborn refusal to die. The next year, the weather returned. The sun crept back, shy and late. The frost lifted, and something green finally broke the soil. You stared at it, this fragile thing, as if it were the first leaf ever grown. You didn't smile, you didn't cry. You just whispered, "Not again." The smallpox plagues of the New World. They didn't come with swords. They came with breath. You'd never seen a ship before. It appeared on the horizon like a mountain with wings, gliding toward the shore, carrying men with metal skin and voices like coughing fire. They stepped onto your land with flags, with crosses, with smiles that didn't reach their eyes. They said they came for gold, but what they brought was smaller. Too small to see, too fast to stop. And it would end more lives than all their guns combined. You didn't feel it at first. No one did. The visitors looked sick, pale, sweating, blistered under their armor. You offered them water, food, shelter. You touched their hands, shared a pipe, sat close. And that was enough. The coughs started quietly, just one or two. Then fevers, then the blisters, angry and tight like boils filled with fire. You saw them rise on your sister's back, then her face, then her eyes. And when they broke open, you could smell death. It spread faster than arrows, faster than wind. One day your village was singing, the next silent. You watched a mother cradle her child, blisters rising on both their skin, as if the disease were a chain trying to bind them together in death. Your people had never known this sickness, no words for it, no remedies, no time. The shamans burned herbs, drew symbols in ash, prayed in circles until they collapsed. It didn't matter. Smallpox had already written your name. Entire towns vanished without a sound, not even buried, just left in their huts, facing the door, as if waiting for someone to say, "You may rest now." Fields grew wild, birds nested in houses. The jungle crept back, like it had been waiting. The invaders didn't have to fight. The land did it for them. They found temples without priests, roads without travelers, cities built by hands that were now dust. They called it conquest. But it was a funeral. You survived. Somehow. You were marked, yes, but your body held. You walked through empty villages, calling names into silence, hoping for a voice, even one. But the trees answered instead. Later, your grandchildren would speak of the time when the stars fell to earth and burned the skin of the innocent. They would call it a curse, a punishment, a test from the gods. But it wasn't. It was biology. A handshake, a breath, a moment, and the world changed. Still, you walked forward. With fewer people, with older eyes, with a heart that remembered every name the wind had taken. Because even after silence, someone must speak again. And somehow, it was you. The Spanish flu of 1918. You survived the war, but the air was still trying to kill you. You thought the worst was over. The war had ended. The noise had stopped. The trenches were filling with silence instead of blood. Men were coming home, limping, coughing, blinking at the light like moles. You stood at the train station with a paper flower and a stomach full of hope. And then he coughed. At first, it seemed ordinary, a cold, a seasonal thing, the kind of illness people got from crowded trains or too much rain. You tucked a blanket around him. You boiled water. You whispered, "It's nothing." But it wasn't. By the second day, his skin turned blue. By the third, he was gone. And the coughing had already spread. It wasn't war. It didn't carry swords or rifles. It carried itself. In droplets, in touch, in breath. It moved through cities like a shadow with a deadline. Hospitals overflowed. Doctors collapsed beside their patients. Funerals were shortened, sometimes skipped entirely. You watched a priest bless a row of bodies from across the street, afraid to breathe. They called it the Spanish flu, though Spain had nothing to do with it, just the first to speak the truth. The rest of the world choked in silence, died in denial. It infected 1 in 3 humans, killed tens of millions. Young, strong, healthy, the kind of people who survived battlefields. They fell in kitchens, collapsed in fields, drowned in their own lungs. You wore a mask, sewed it yourself. It smelled like soap and fear. You avoided crowds, closed your windows, whispered through doors. And still, you watched neighbors disappear. Your mother got it, then your sister, then a boy you once loved but never kissed, because the world ended before you could. You burned their sheets, scrubbed the floor with vinegar, lit a candle and left it burning for 3 days. The air was too quiet now. You stopped touching people, stopped singing, stopped hoping. Not out of despair, but precaution. Hope felt like an open mouth, a risk. One day the coughing stopped, not everywhere, but enough. You stepped outside. The sun was too bright, the world too large. You didn't run to anyone. You nodded from across the street, waved, smiled behind cloth. You'd learned what breath could do. Later, they would call it history, a pandemic, a tragedy. But for you, it was just the year the air turned hostile. The year you learned that peace doesn't always mean safety, that silence can still kill, but also that humans somehow keep inhaling.
The Great Chinese Famine, 1959 to 1961. The grain bins were full, but you starved anyway. You were told this would be a new era, a people's dream, a harvest without hunger, a revolution of plenty. There were posters, bright, red, full of smiling workers and golden wheat. You marched behind drums. You raised flags. You believed. Until belief became dangerous. Until speaking about your empty stomach was called sabotage. They told you to farm differently, to plant deeper, tighter, higher. They told you to kill the sparrows. They ate too much, they said. So you clapped your hands for days, watched the birds fall from the sky, wings limp, eyes empty. You didn't know that without sparrows, the locusts would come. And they did. They came like hunger with wings. Still, the officials smiled. Still, the quotas rose. Still, the grain disappeared. You worked the fields until your hands cracked. You bundled stalks that crumbled in your grip. You loaded carts that never returned. And when you asked, "Where is the food?" they said, "You must work harder." You boiled bark. You ate dirt shaped into cakes. You scraped rice husks from the floor. You ground corn cobs into powder and called it porridge. Your neighbor cooked leather. The shoemaker disappeared. The graveyard grew. Whispers came from the north. Entire villages gone. Children buried in the same furrow they planted. A man arrested for stealing grain from a government shed. His wife turned him in. Not because she was loyal, because she was starving. You remember the worst moment. Not the hunger. You were used to that. The worst was when you stopped hearing babies cry, because now they were born silent, or not born at all. You tried to complain. Once, you said, "We are dying." But your voice was written down, and that night 2 men came to your door, not to feed you, to warn you. Next time, there would be no door left. So you stayed silent, even when your mother collapsed, even when your brother gave his last rice to your son, even when you looked at your child and thought, "If I don't eat, maybe they will." And still, somehow, you didn't die. You watched the storm pass, the fields recover, the silence loosen. You never marched again. You never clapped again. You never believed in bright posters or red flags or full grain bins. But you held your child. And one day, they held their child. And the world moved forward because you chose to live through the lie.
Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The sky didn't break, it disappeared. You woke up thinking it was just another August morning. Warm air, cicadas screaming from the trees, the smell of rice, the clatter of bicycles. You had no idea you were living in the final seconds of a normal world. You boiled water. You adjusted your uniform.
You kissed your child on the forehead without knowing it might be the last touch they'd ever feel. The city buzzed with life until it didn't. There was no warning, no alarm, no shape to the danger. Just a sudden, impossible light, brighter than the sun, brighter than memory, brighter than thought. And then, heat. A wall of it, a fist, a god you never prayed to, ripping the air from your lungs. Buildings evaporated. People vanished mid-step. Shadows burned into walls, the only proof that someone had stood there. You remember the color of that second. It wasn't white. It was something deeper, like the sky had been pierced and was bleeding light. Then came the sound. Not thunder, not explosion. Absence. Everything you knew turned inside out in one breathless instant. You didn't die, not then. You opened your eyes, and the world was wrong. Fire fell like rain. Paper burned before it hit the ground. The river boiled. You ran toward it anyway. People jumped in, skin hanging from their arms like wet cloth, eyes white with ash, children with no mouths, mothers carrying arms that no longer had children in them. You screamed for help, but no one knew how. The hospitals were gone, the doctors gone. The streets were choked with people who could no longer speak. You tried to find your home. It wasn't there. You tried to find your family. They were shadows on a wall. You wandered for hours, holding a piece of someone else's body because your own hands didn't know where to go. And still, 3 days later, it happened again. A second city, a second sun, a second silence. The world had never seen this kind of power. And you had never seen what it meant to survive it. In the years that followed, your hair fell out. Your teeth loosened. Strangers coughed blood beside you on the train. You lit candles for people who never had names. You memorized the sound of falling skin. You forgot how to sleep through rain. But you lived, one breath at a time, one scar deeper each year. You told your story, not to be remembered, but so the fire wouldn't be. And somewhere, decades later, a child saw your photograph, asked what the shadow meant, why it had no face, why the wall was crying. And someone said, that's where time stopped. But it didn't stop, because you kept walking.
The near miss of 1983. The world almost ended. One man didn't let it. It was a quiet night. Nothing unusual. Nothing on fire. No missiles in the sky. Just a man named Stanislav Petrov sitting at his post, blinking at a screen, watching the world not end. Until it did. Or almost did. The screen flashed, a siren wailed, a red word blinked over and over. Launch. Not one, 5. 5 American missiles inbound. Nuclear. Real. Impossible. And for a moment, the Earth held its breath. Protocols were clear. The computer said it. The lights confirmed it. Retaliate now. Wake the generals. Press the button. End the world. Stanislav stared at the screen. His finger hovered over the phone. And he did nothing. Because something felt wrong. 5 missiles? Not hundreds. The satellite system was new, untrustworthy. The logic was off. So was the silence. If America wanted war, it wouldn't be 5. It would be everything. He made a choice. He said, no, it's a false alarm. And then he waited to see if he had just killed his country with silence. The missiles never came because they had never existed. It was a glitch, a reflection of sunlight off high-altitude clouds, a phantom sent by bad programming and good weather. But the machine didn't know that. The machine just saw enemy, attack, fire. And the man said, no. The next morning, the world went on like nothing had happened. People went to work, ate cereal, yelled at traffic, watched TV, not knowing they had come one button away from ending history, not knowing they had lived because one man trusted his gut more than a blinking red light. He was reprimanded, of course, punished for not reporting the incident properly. He lived out his life in a small apartment, forgotten by the country he saved. He never thought of himself as a hero, just a man who didn't want to be the reason children turned to ash. He didn't write a book, didn't build a monument. He watered his plants, read quietly, refused the title of savior, because what he had saved was absence. Later, when asked how he stayed calm, he said, I had a feeling. I just didn't want to start World War III. And you? You've walked through this life, never knowing how many near deaths it took to let you be born. How many coughs, volcanoes, famines, swords, and quiet refusals carried your name forward. You exist because people didn't press the button, because someone chewed bark, because someone outran the fire, because someone chose not to believe the machine. You are improbable, and still, you are here. Thank you for listening. If this story meant something to you, please subscribe, leave a like, and write in the comments what city you're listening from and what time it is, because someone else might be drifting off right now, wondering if they were ever supposed to exist at all. And maybe your words will remind them. You were, and so were they.